Yesterday, the 9th of May 2025, in a Privy Council meeting at Buckingham Palace, King Charles III finally approved the new Great Seal of the United Kingdom. Here is the King, alongside the Lord Chancellor, with boxes that contain both the seal matrices of his new Great Seal and those of his late mother. It's customary on the accession of a new sovereign for a new Great Seal to be produced, and that is usually undertaken within a year of the accession. But it has taken over 2.5 years for a new Great Seal to be produced for Charles III. I have absolutely no idea why. You may at this stage be wondering what on earth a Great Seal is and what it is used for. And in this video I will try to explain its purpose, why and how it is used, as well as commentating a little bit on the design of the new Great Seal, which expresses aspects of continuity with the past and also a bit of a break with a 900-year tradition. Now, until yesterday, King Charles III had been using the Great Seal of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, a seal that was introduced in 2001 to replace one made in 1953. And as well as approving his new Great Seal, the King also put the old seal out of commission, which is why both sets of matrices were present. This is done in much the same way as the Fisherman's Ring of Pope Francis was put out of commission before the papal conclave this week, by slightly damaging the surface of it and thus defacing and voiding it. The Great Seal of the United Kingdom has two matrices for the obverse and the reverse, the front and the back of the seal. And yesterday the King will have made some very small marks on these two surfaces with a hammer and punch, thus defacing them and preventing them from being used again. The Great Seal of the United Kingdom is an object that is important and is used frequently. It is affixed to some of the most significant governmental documents in order to express the sovereign's will. The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy, and the King is the summit and linchpin of government. All governments are formed in the sovereign's name, all justice is exercised in their name, and the stability of the Church of England is assured under them, with the King acting as the Church's supreme governor. Due to the effects of a complex history, including such moments as the English Civil War, the Commonwealth and the Glorious Revolution of 1688, British sovereigns now exercise their great power with restraint. They act only with the consent of Parliament and through the advice of their government. The sovereign has what are termed prerogative powers that only they can formally exercise, although in practice, except on rare occasions, they exercise them only after advice. All the appointments of office holders in all of the significant areas of national life are made under the royal prerogative, and such appointments are formally made using a document called a letters patent, to which the Great Seal is then affixed. Without a Great Seal to signify the sovereign's will and consent, such appointments cannot be made, and the organs of government simply grind to a halt. Before I move on, I want to address my pronunciation of the word patent. Last time I talked about letters patent in a video, I had numerous comments by disgruntled English people that I'd pronounced it incorrectly. The word patent is more commonly pronounced, at least in other contexts, as patent in the UK, and many British people consider the pronunciation patent to be an Americanism. In truth, both pronunciations are quite correct. The term letters patent derives from the Latin litterae patentes, and the pronunciation patent is true to the Latin. In my pronunciation of the word, I am following parliamentary precedent, for the clerks of the House of Lords, who routinely read out these documents at the creation of peers, have pronounced it patent for at least the last 40 years. This Latin word, patentes, patent, means to lie open, and it is simply used to describe the document's format. A letters patent is a letter that is flat rather than folded, so its contents are laid open to public view. Letters patent usually begin with the phrase, "to all and singular and to whom these presents come," which means this letter is addressed to everyone and not just to the person to whom the document pertains, conveying that the contents are public and to be widely known. There is, incidentally, no such thing as a letter patent singular. The plural form is always used. The Great Seal is only ever used to seal letters patent. It is affixed to the bottom of the document, where since the Middle Ages it has been suspended by plaited silk cords. Different colours of wax are traditionally used for different categories of letters patent. The vast majority of impressions are made in red wax. These are used to appoint people to major offices such as bishops or judges, or for grants to corporate bodies such as granting borough or city status. Up until the reign of Queen Victoria, sometimes yellow wax was used for this purpose instead. Green wax is traditionally used for the elevation of people to titles of honour, such as peerages, when people are elevated to the House of Lords, and baronetcies, hereditary knighthoods. Blue wax is the rarest seen and is reserved for documents that pertain to members of the royal family, such as the creation of the Prince of Wales. The silk cords used to attach the seal vary in colour. They often match the colour of the wax seal itself. When a blue seal is used, gold cords are sometimes used. In the Tudor and Stuart periods, the cords were invariably green and red. In times past, the person who kept the Great Seal on behalf of the sovereign and made it available to the king when it was required was a courtier and official who had great power and significance. In the 12th century, it was usually the Lord Chancellor of England who kept hold of the Great Seal. The Lord Chancellor was usually a churchman, a bishop, and was often away from court on church business. Therefore, in order that royal business could continue in his absence, it became the practice in the later Middle Ages to place the Great Seal in the possession of a deputy chancellor. In time, this role grew into that of the office of the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal of England and later of Great Britain. The Lord Keepership carried on as a separate office until the second half of the 18th century. The last Lord Keeper of Great Britain was Robert Henley, 1st Earl of Northington, who was appointed in 1757. But in 1761 he became Lord Chancellor as well, and since then the two roles have merged again. And that is why the current Lord Chancellor, Shabana Mahmood, was present with the King yesterday in Privy Council when the new seal was authorised. She is officially the seal's guardian and keeper, and she was being entrusted with it by the King. In the Middle Ages, the matrices of the seal were kept in a special drawstring bag or purse, and to ensure their security, the bag was carried around on the person of the Lord Keeper at all times, which, as well as being a terrible responsibility, must have been a cumbrous task. As time went on, these purses became more and more elaborate. These two paintings of Elizabethan Lord Keepers show the seal purse embroidered with the arms of the Queen. This delightful little miniature of Sir Christopher Hatton, Elizabeth I's Lord Keeper, shows the purse laid down on a green baize-covered table beside him, and you'll notice that it has a long cord which allowed it to be carried around by the Lord Keeper like a satchel, so that it was always, in the context of the court, there at the command of the sovereign. In the 17th century, this little bag evolved into a larger square purse, which was still elaborately embroidered with the royal arms. Even today, the Lord Chancellor, as Keeper of the Great Seal, carries the seal purse on state occasions, though it is often carried before them by a purse bearer. The Great Seal purse is prominently seen today during state openings of Parliament, where the speech from the throne read by the King is carried by the Lord Chancellor in it. When a Lord Keeper or Chancellor was dismissed, they would return the Great Seal directly to the sovereign, but it was the tradition that an outgoing Lord Chancellor could keep the purse as a perquisite of office, and so rather a lot of them survive. Now, a new seal purse is usually made for each reign. For some time now, at least since the reign of Queen Victoria, the seal purse carried by the Lord Chancellor has been purely symbolic. The physical Great Seal matrix is no longer kept in it. As government became busier and more complex, and the matrix was needed more often, it was kept instead in one place. It is now kept permanently in the Palace of Westminster in the House of Lords, in the office of a civil servant called the Clerk of the Crown in Chancery, the person who is the permanent secretary of the Lord Chancellor's Department, the Ministry of Justice. All the documents that the King must sign, called warrants, as well as all the letters patent, are produced in that department. Which brings us on to how the Great Seal is actually impressed. The matrices are designed to fit very closely together. The bottom matrix, which carries the impression of the reverse of the seal, has 2 pegs on it, and that allows the upper matrix with the obverse to line up well with the bottom. A cake of softened wax was placed into the bottom matrix, and the cords were laid on top of that, and then a further cake of wax was placed on top of that before the upper matrix was fitted in place and pressed down. This trapped the cords within the seal. The matrices were heated slightly to give a good impression, and any excess wax from the finished impression was trimmed away. In the Middle Ages, right through to the 20th century, the formulation of the wax used for the Great Seal was a careful mixture of beeswax with some form of rosin added to it, which would allow the seal to take a very good impression, but would also harden and would produce a durable seal. To this was added a colouring agent for the red, the toxic vermilion, and for the green, the slightly less toxic verdigris. In modern times, the traditional wax has given way to the use of certain plastic compounds. The seals are still traditionally pressed between the matrices of the Great Seal, then applied to a letters patent. The matrices of the Great Seal are made of silver, which is relatively soft, and as they are used frequently, they do eventually wear out and have to be replaced. George III had 5 or perhaps 6 Great Seal matrices during his reign. Queen Victoria had 4, George VI and Elizabeth II both had 2. So let's have a look at the design of the Great Seal of Charles III, which will enter service this week. It strongly resembles the second Great Seal of Elizabeth II, the King's late mother, as well as taking some inspiration from past precedent, including the seal of the King's grandfather, King George VI. The obverse, the front of the seal, is engraved with an image of the King enthroned, and so far they've been tight-lipped about who designed this. On the reverse is a depiction of the royal arms of the sovereign, designed by herald painter to the College of Arms Timothy Node. The new matrices are made, as is traditional, of silver and have been machine engraved at the Royal Mint in Llantrisant in South Wales. Of course, in the past, these would have been hand engraved. The king is shown seated on a throne. He is wearing a coronation robe, though it doesn't seem to depict a particular coronation or state robe, and he holds both the orb and the sovereign sceptre with the cross containing Cullinan I. The crown on his head is not a depiction of either the imperial state crown or St Edward's crown, but is rather the idealised Tudor crown that the king has chosen for his own royal cipher, which takes its cue from the lost crown of Henry VIII. Around the image is an inscription in Latin describing the king's styles and titles. The inscription, which is standardised on all Great Seals, translates as Charles III, by the grace of God of the Britons and of his other realms, King, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith. The inscription is, of course, engraved in reverse, so that it creates a positive image when impressed. The inscriptions on Great Seals have always been in Latin, the lingua franca of the West, since the time of Edward the Confessor, who was the first English king to have a Great Seal of this format. The depiction of the king enthroned with emblems of majesty on the obverse of the seal also goes right back to the reign of Edward the Confessor too, and is a continuous tradition. It was traditional on the reverse of the seal from the time of William the Conqueror onwards to have an image of the sovereign depicted on horseback, ready for war. The male sovereigns until the reign of Charles I were shown in full contemporary armour on horseback as though in the heat of battle. From the reign of Charles II, that was replaced by an image of the sovereign dressed as a Roman general. Edward VII was depicted riding on horseback, crowned and holding his sceptre. George VI is shown on horseback in uniform as though on the way to trooping the colour. Female sovereigns have also been depicted on the reverse of their Great Seal on horseback, usually riding side saddle, but not in armour. Elizabeth I was shown in one of her distinctive gowns, crowned and holding orb and sceptre and surrounded by the emblems of her nations. Queen Victoria was shown being led on horseback by a groom wearing her robe of state, the garter collar, and crowned and holding a sceptre. Elizabeth II's Great Seal of 1953, taking the lead of her father, depicted her wearing uniform on the way to her birthday parade. Well, I think that 900-year tradition of showing the sovereign on horseback on the reverse of the Great Seal is now a thing of the past. For Elizabeth II's 2001 Great Seal, it was replaced with an image of the royal arms, and Charles III has done the same with his new seal. He now has the royal arms on it. It was also traditional for the inscription on the obverse of the seal to be repeated on the reverse, either in full or in an abbreviated form, but that too was abandoned in 2001 and has not returned in 2025. So there you have it. The Great Seal is a tradition with a 1,000-year-old history, but it is a living tradition that is still an important part of the political processes within the British state. I'm sure there are other more up-to-date ways of expressing the royal will in documents in this digital age, but none that have the visual gravitas and the historical continuity of the Great Seal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this channel, you're bound to enjoy my magazine, The Antiquary. Published every month, it is a labour of love for me, and in it I explore some of the more obscure aspects of our shared history, all beautifully illustrated in full colour. It ships across the world, is offered in print and digital format, and readers give it 5 stars on Google. If you love your history like me, particularly the history of objects, buildings, people and places, why not consider subscribing? Subscribing helps support my work and the channel too. There's a link above and in the video description that takes you to the magazine website.